my entire sense of the fabric of reality started to rip to shreds, and all that was around me was just this pitch black void of nothingness. And I thought about, what if we were actually in hell?
The following video does not glorify drug use, but instead it intends to educate people and create awareness leading to harm reduction by discouraging the abuse of drugs, and maybe even harm elimination by discouraging drug use altogether. This video shows some of the effects psychedelic substances can have on the mind while also highlighting what causes those specific effects or outcomes. However, with that being said, these are random people. Please don't make decisions based on what they say without your own due diligence, and also take note that these substances affect everyone differently, especially those with pre-existing mental conditions.
I decided spontaneously about a week before I ended up having the trip that I wanted to do a trip, and I took the trip for kind of personal growth reasons, and I looked online everywhere, and I kept seeing how 5 grams is a heroic dose and how intense that would be. And combined that with when I got the mushrooms, I could only buy them as a minimum of 7 grams at a time, and I wasn't interested in tripping again, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to take all 7 grams because I want to make sure this experience is as intense as it can be, and I knew what I was doing was extremely, not the smartest thing to do for someone on, their second trip. So I just took the time to get prepared for it, and I'd already been meditating about 30 minutes every day beforehand for the last 2 months or so.
What was your intention going into that experience?
To be honest, my intention was just to experience whatever I would experience. I told myself I would be happy if nothing happened on the other side, or if I somehow saw a devil or something. I just wanted to let the shrooms do their thing and just to take what I can from it. So I had been meditating for a long time beforehand, and I already, even before the room trip of the 7 grams, I actually had some ego dissolution experiences while completely sober. And I kind of wanted to also see if, for some reason, an ego death did happen on the 7-gram trip. I wanted to compare that to what I've been through sober. So I just kept meditating through that week until the day came that I got the shrooms, and then I decided to take them the next morning on Saturday. For the shroom trip itself, I was pretty scared to start because I knew that I was doing something really intense, and I prepared myself. I had a playlist ready that I put together across the week, and I was a little afraid, but I decided to go through with it, and I ate all of the mushrooms. And then before that, there was one song that I got to listen to fully, and that was Push It Live by Push It Tool, and it was the live version, which is one of their first more psychedelic songs. That's what I wanted my playlist to start with. I just happen to be a big Tool fan. I don't have any particular resonance with them as some sort of, I don't see them as more than they are. I really like their art. And I did that, and then I played a little bit of guitar, and then I could feel that the mushrooms were starting to hit really hard. So I put my guitar away, and then I just laid down, and I think I took my headset off. And after that, everything started to go crazy. I don't know how it transitioned to it, but everything around me was pitch black. My room was dark at the time, even though it was morning. I had my curtains closed and the lights off, but it was completely pitch black in my mind, and my entire sense of the fabric of reality started to rip to shreds, and all that was around me was just this pitch black void of nothingness, and all of the terrifying thoughts that came with that. And I started thinking about my own mortality, and I thought about, what if we were actually in hell? And sort of these different paranoid, scared thoughts. And around me, as these thoughts circled and circled, I kind of saw 2 different images. I saw a sort of infinite loop of pain and suffering around around me that was like an energy flow. And then alongside that, I got mental images of a mandala made of pain. I'm not sure if that's how you say the word right, where it's like an artistic piece that is made up of different Zentangle art in a sort of circular shape. And I sort of had this circular perpetual cycle pain calendar form in my head as I was looking around at this zooming energy pain spiral around my head. It was kind of terrifying to me, and a lot of it is a little spotty in my brain in terms of remembering which events happened exactly when, but I know around this time as well, either before or after. I think after the pain spiral, if I remember right. I was sitting there kind of freaking out. I was convinced for a split second that something was terribly wrong, and I was convinced pretty badly that I heard a siren going off outside my window. I thought my window was broken, and I thought that I had gone crazy and didn't realize it. And I kept going in and out of believing this thing, as it was kind of fighting with my own mental psyche for grounding. And I kept grabbing at my bed and like seeing that it's real. I'm looking at my window and I could see that it was not broken. For some reason, I had a pretty decent grasp on my visuals around me. It wasn't like a super visual trip for that part. But I did get more and more of these worries, and I kind of fell back onto my bed. I kind of was like grabbing at my bed sheets really hard, like at my blankets and things. And grabbing onto those made these sort of like spiral sensations come out of my hand. And as I closed my eyes while trying to grab onto that, and just trying to feel grounded in the present instead of freaking out. From the sort of spiral feelings in my hands, around me sort of erupted this pillar that I was inside, and on the pillar, spiraling downwards, were these different windows into different sort of hell realities that were created by what I later realized to be my anxiety. I saw a lot of like really personal ideas and things be torn away from me. And in my mind, I was thinking about just how arbitrary and how small my perspective was, and how I'm from New Mexico, from a small town out in the desert, and I kind of was thinking about my entire childhood, and I could smell the desert at that, and I could just sense how minuscule and how unimportant it all was, and it was freaking me out. That was sort of going through my mind as I saw these different spiraling windows form around me inside of a pillar. And the pillar looked very much like a Tool album, which I mentioned in my trip reports. But I could see different things, such as my family abandoning me for me being trans. I could see them just generally being disappointed in me. I saw myself being fired from my work. I will say something kind of funny in hindsight. I don't know if you know the video game Morrowind from the Elder Scrolls series, but I could see the main enemy. His name is Dagothur, and I could see him in some of the different eye windows for some reason. And in that game, he is seen as a mad god, and Morrowind is a little bit metaphysical itself. Basically, in my mind, he was appearing as some sort of egotistical delusion enemy, where it was basically showing me, oh, I could become like this guy Dagothur. But I just kept holding down as I descended through the spiral, and I got to see all these different images in front of me. And I don't remember what everything was. A lot of it was fairly hazy. But I got to the bottom of it, and I realized that all of that I just went through were all just my thoughts. It was all just my perceptions around me, and I felt so intense by that. I felt as if I somehow like became a god or achieved some sort of godhood status, because I realized just how powerful what I did was, at least internally. And then I was like, oh my gosh, what if I am a god? What if I have full control over everything? And the little part of my brain was doubting that. And so naturally, as someone who assumes that they're god, the first thing I decided to do was to make my bed. And I did this as a way to try to ground myself. I set out to make the bed, and I realized in order for me to actually have my bed to be completely made how I wanted to, I couldn't snap my fingers as if I was some omnipowerful person. I had to make it. I remember just kind of like being like, wait, would that mean I'm not God? And so I was like, at that point, I'm going to sit down and meditate. I sat down on top of my made bed, and when I did that, I got different visions of what it would be like for me to live as an egotistical sort of person who assumes himself to be God. And I saw a lot of different forms of kind of like what seemed to me to be like psychosis play past me. And one thing I poignantly remember is I saw the main leader of the Boxers Rebellion, who thought he was Jesus Christ's brother, and this was in China. This is a historical event that happened, and I remember thinking about how he led to the deaths of 20 million different innocent people and ravaged a lot of the population in China at the time. And I kind of thought about how if I saw myself as a god, even if it wasn't to that level, I would act egotistically and in a way that would hurt others.
Whenever I was reading your trip report, I was completely caught off guard with that. I was like, wait, what?
So this is kind of getting near the sort of end, I think. Like sometime after this was the peak of the trip, but I remember afterwards just sitting there thinking about how I just thought about the Boxers Rebellion. I thought about all these different genocides and things, and I thought about, no, you're not a god. And then I was like, well, what am I? And then I was like, wait, who is the person who took these mushrooms? I kind of thought of myself from a more floaty sense. Like I didn't see myself from my own eyes. It got really indescribable, but I basically started to sense maybe something was better than I expected maybe I'm not going to be stuck in some sort of hell world if I don't cling to some sort of idea of something, I guess you could say. And at one point during that time, my room started to glow completely yellow, and it looked like it was coming in from my window, and it just had this like beautiful golden hue to it, and it was like really beautiful. And then during this time, I was like, okay, who is this primate individual living on this planet who decided to take these drugs? So I was like, okay, who decided to do this? Why did they do it? And I was thinking, oh, because of non-duality, which I'd been reading a lot before. And then suddenly everything around me just, it was like, do you know the Spore menu? Like the video game Spore, the main menu of it. It has a spiral blue sort of menu that looks like an entire galaxy. And that kind of became my entire world. And I saw myself as just one speck going through it. And that all that I actually am is just the energy that is active at any point, that is basically keeping these different atoms, these different molecules, these different cells together and working. I saw myself as just a part of the universe. And in that, I also saw myself as being part of something greater than myself. And I felt suddenly as if I was in heaven, and I realized all that there is the present moment, and that is all. I was so happy about that, and it was like everything just showed me that basically what I was looking for in that time of being so terrified, of having all this anxiety, everything that I needed was just here in the now, in the present. And there wasn't any weirdness to it. It wasn't like, oh, this means that, there's these spirits watching or anything. It just felt like, nope, this is the present and this is nirvana. So yeah, for the end of the trip that I took, I just went and I took a shower and I just got prepared for some dinner plans that I had. It was just like, oh, well, it's just all I need to do is just business as usual.
Did you experience any long-term effects? I know it's only been so long, but any lingering effects since that experience concluded?
My entire perception of my consciousness has not gone back. It's been kind of trippy, but every single moment I see myself as just being what I am in this moment, and the past and the present feel like fantasies to me now. And it's like I constantly think about the fact that something I felt like I learned on that trip was how there's not that big of a difference between what we perceive as reality versus what is actually just our own thoughts. Not to say that our own thoughts are the world. The world is, I would say, we can kind of gather that it's out there and it has a sort of permanence to it, you might say. But basically, I kind of realized how, with the mushrooms, I was able to go through and experience things that might as well have been real with how they impacted my perception and my sense of existence. And because of that, I've now been unable to go back to seeing things how I did before the trip. My sense of self is a lot more different. I feel more compassion towards myself since the trip. I feel like everything is the exact same but completely different. I feel like I kind of have a key to where I can live life contently now instead of feeling constantly questioning about what's going on. Weed has been a lot more intense afterwards now. It's been more psychedelic to do that.
What do you think contributed to the outcome of that experience, or just the different factors involved? Like, I know you brought up you had previous experiences with very intense meditation, from what it sounded like.
Yeah, a big thing that definitely impacted it is the stuff that I've been reading about beforehand from that book, Non-Duality in Buddhism and Beyond, which I had been reading for some time, especially while I was going through a bit of rejection, which is fine. But basically, yeah, there was that, and then all the meditation that I did, and the sort of view I already had of non-duality while going into the psychedelics. And so all of that, I feel like, factored into how the trip ended up being handled, and how I came to that realization at the end, since essentially the mushrooms were just working with what was already there in my own noggin, just on its own, cranked to like 1,000.